LARPer. Okay, what I'm concerned about with this, we were talking about this before the break, is that we've always had this issue inside of the UFO community. And I have stressed with everybody's got something that they can bring to the table. It's up to you to use your discernment. But when we start pointing fingers and saying you can't believe or you can't do, then nobody's going to talk in this community. And one of the things about this community that has been so beautiful over the years is that it's like the barbershop. You can come on in, share your experiences, whatever they may be, and people have open ears and they listen. And that's it. And that's the one beautiful thing that we've always had going for us. And that is the second we start pointing fingers and accusing, especially if you come from a position of authority and start saying, don't listen to this person. Now we are damaging the one piece of our foundation that kept us threaded together.
Well, I'm literally a 23-year veteran of being involved in this UFO community online, basically since the dawn of the internet itself. And over those 23 years, one of the things that I've seen very consistently is that the people who are obvious fakes and obvious frauds, I believe in karma, and I believe there's so many examples of karma catching up to them. They will run out of steam. They will get caught in a lie, and typically what happens is they have to do something grandiose to try to, like a publicity stunt, to try to get attention. And so they will make up some story, and then the story doesn't happen, and a lot of times the blowback from that causes them to never want to do anything again, and they just sort of disappear. So my experience is that most of the people who are making up stories, they just kind of come and go, and they gradually what's going to happen is they get blacklisted from all the conferences, they get blacklisted from all the radio shows, and you just don't hear from them anymore. But I will also say this, as a 23-year veteran of these wars, you don't ever want to, as a fellow public figure in this community, you don't ever want to go up against other people. And the reason why is that no matter how outlandishly ridiculous somebody's statements are, and just to be perfectly frank, some of the most outrageous I've seen over the years have been people claiming that they're channeling and that they're in contact with certain beings from certain places. And in many cases, these people create a grand cosmic narrative that's only self-referential. It doesn't have any outside means of validation. You either believe the whole thing or you don't believe any of it. But no matter how ludicrous it may seem, if you hear that name, if you know that person is around and they're giving their content, they're going to have their army. They're going to have their whole crew. And I learned a long time ago, if you pick a fight with anybody in this community, you're not just fighting them, you're fighting all of their supporters. And then that person will now make it their holy cause to mobilize their supporters against you, which you really don't want. You don't want to make enemies. So there's a lot of people who are totally fascinated by my work, and it's meant a lot to them. And then I find out that they're also into other things that I don't think are credible. And it's okay. My job is not to control people. My job is just to provide interesting information. And I believe that the cream rises to the top, and I believe the truth will set you free. And along the way, I, in the past, got involved in pan out. I figured out later they were not true. And it's okay. We don't have to. This is an investigation, and part of good scientific research is ruling things out once you find evidence that disproves them. And I'm happy to do that. But I'm also happy to encourage people to study as much as they want and just see what fits with them and discard the rest.
And there's also is a pretty alarming trend that has been going on for Well, it's been out there on the internet for a while, but it's now gotten into the UFO community, which is doxing. And it's going on from all sides. It's a pretty bizarre thing to see happening here. But now we're also getting into a zone of this community where we are all supposed to be enlightened, awakened, generous, giving, caring, and we're supposed to have an emotional bond between us. And to see this kind of stuff start to take off in a community of enlightened souls that are supposed to be, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10th, 11th dimensional beings doing this kind of stuff. That's where I just got to draw the line here. Why do we have to see this happen?
Well, one of the victims of this recently was Emery Smith, and I actually called him up and I said, dude, there's some stuff about you on the internet that looks really bad. And he said, David, do you know how many people have the last name Smith? I'm like, oh, man. So, and some of it doesn't even, some of the things that were purported to be pinned on him don't even have the name Emery. It's just E. Smith. And since Smith is the most popular name in the Western Hemisphere here, there's going to be other Emery Smiths. And one of the things Emery told me is, that they're trying to say, these documents are trying to say that I was like a cocaine dealer and I was sitting in prison. And he said, during that time, I was doing all these conferences about health technology. And I said, well, you ought to come forward and you ought to, talk about this. But I think he's trying to figure out how to handle this thing, because these are malicious attacks. The deep state may be behind them. There could be all kinds of disinformation mixed in. And of course, they can have a lot of fun with a guy whose last name is Smith, because it's practically limitless opportunity to try to falsely pin things on somebody. It's malicious. It's not helping. And I even told Emery this. I said, dude, even if you did have a life of crime before, and these other people that also have a similar name to your name, if it was you, right, that doesn't necessarily diminish your credibility, because you came out of a horrific environment where you're working in these black projects, and then you end up with post-traumatic stress disorder. So if you did end up on drugs, if you did end up committing crimes to support your drug habit, coming forward as a whistleblower and paying your debt to society, you're still exonerating yourself. It's really troublesome to me that we as a society don't acknowledge that if the justice system has you run through a course of what they would call corrections, right, like the Department of Corrections or a correctional institution, you're supposed to be corrected when you get out. You're not supposed to have the guilt of what you did before stay with you when you've quote-unquote paid your debt to society. So, for whatever reason, I've actually never gotten busted for anything. There was one, I was thinking about this, if anybody was going to dox me, about the worst thing you'd ever find is that when I was in my freshman year of college and I was home on summer vacation, my mother and father both insisted I get a job. And I worked for an environmental lobbying group called NYPIRG, or New York Public Interest Research Group. And on the first day, I'd forgotten a pen, and they asked me to canvass a pen, which meant go to people's houses. This was door-to-door selling, okay? I was going door-to-door, knocking on people's doors and asking them to support financially a lobbying initiative to reduce the amount of packaging in consumer goods. It was called the WRAP Act, or Waste Reduction and Packaging Act. So we were trying to get no styrofoam, it's got to be cardboard instead of styrofoam containers, reduce the amount of packaging in the things that they sell, and we were lobbying for that. And so I asked somebody for a pen. I asked several people in their houses for a pen because I didn't have one, and somebody called the police. And so I have this cop car pull up, and I got a little statement from the guy, and I actually did have to go to court, and they gave me something called own recognizance, or OR, which meant that I was released on my own recognizance, meaning I recognized that I'd done something wrong and I'd apologized. It's literally my whole criminal history right there. I tried to ask people for a pen when I'm lobbying for the environment. But if I had done something worse, if I had actually spent time in jail, does that make me invalid? Does that make my voice?
You know what, David?
That's so ridiculous.
Yeah, David, you're starting to drift in and out with your phone. It's the connection. Are you wandering around the house? Stay put. Look at your bars.
No, let me try to get. I'm going to try to get a lot closer